The battle lasted 9 minutes. The silence afterward lasted 3 hours, and Inez Vale spent all 3 of them listening to it. She was a civilian, a signals contractor, 26 years old, seconded to the carrier Sparrowhawk to maintain the sensor suite she had helped design. She had never expected to hear a war through it. For a year, raider ships had been hitting humanity's outer stations, fuel depots stripped, ore barges gutted, an entire mining platform at Palace cracked open for its water ice. The raiders came fast, hit hard, and vanished into the asteroid belt, and the news feeds had given them a name that stuck. The locusts, nobody had ever seen one up close. Nobody had ever caught one. Until today. Today, humanity's first true battle fleet, 30 warships built in fury and funded by fear, had cornered the locust swarm against the flank of a mountain-sized asteroid. Inez had watched the tactical display bloom with fire. The enemy had scattered like startled birds. Their return fire had been pitiful, wild, barely aimed. 30 human ships had fired in disciplined sequence, and after 9 minutes there was nothing left to shoot at. Now the fleet was celebrating. She could hear it through the deck hole compartments singing. Humanity's first fleet action, a perfect victory, not one human casualty. Inez stayed at her console, headphones on, because her job was the sensor suite, and the sensor suite was still listening. The wreckage field tumbled slowly on her screen, 11,000 fragments, cooling toward the temperature of the dark. At the 3rd hour, she isolated an anomaly, a rhythm, faint, metallic, repeating. Somewhere in that field of ruin, something was tapping against a hull, in groups, in patterns, in counts of 3. By midnight, ship time, Inez Vale had brought her tapping to the flag bridge and learned how unwelcome a sound could be. The Admiral heard her out. To his credit, he heard the recording too, all 4 minutes of it, the patient metallic knocking rising and falling through the wreckage field. Then he asked her what she was proposing, and Inez realized she had walked in without an answer. Rescue operations, she said. There are survivors in that field. The flag bridge went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with respect. The fleet had standing orders written after a year of burn stations. No boarding, no salvage, no contact with locust technology until the science teams cleared it. There were mines to consider, traps. A crew that opened a raider wreck could be opening anything. And under the procedure, under the reasonable words, Inez heard the true reason plainly. Everyone was afraid of the locusts, and it was easier to let the dark have them. The Admiral was not a cruel man. He gave her the middle answer. The fleet would hold position and observe. Science boats would survey at a safe distance. If the taps were survivors, the survivors had lifeboats, and lifeboats had transmitters, and no distress signal was being sent. Whatever was knocking could ask for help properly. Inez went back to her console and pulled apart the wrecks on maximum resolution, looking for lifeboat transmitters, wanting him to be right. She found the lifeboats, dozens of them intact, scattered through the field like seeds. Her spectrometer told her what her gut already knew. The lifeboats had no transmitters. They had never had transmitters. Whoever built them had stripped out everything that was not air and water and walls. The knocking was the distress signal. It was all they had. 2 days into the vigil over the wreckage, Inez Vale found the thing that changed the shape of the war. The stakes by then were brutally simple. The lifeboats held air for some number of days that nobody could calculate. The fleet held position under orders not to touch them, and Earth was already drafting medals for the Battle of the Shallows. Every hour of caution was an hour off someone's air supply. Inez had stopped sleeping much. She was cataloging wreck fragments for the science teams when the pattern emerged. She was looking at the weapons. Specifically, she could not find any. The fleet's after-action report credited the locust swarm with 61 combat vessels, but the fragments told a different story. The hulls were mining ships, every one. The terrible raider weapons were rock-cracking charges or cutters drilling lances. Powerful, dangerous, and utterly wrong for war, like a fleet armed with farm tools. The wild, unaimed return fire of the battle had been unaimed because none of it was designed to aim at anything that moved. She took it to the fleet intelligence officer, expecting resistance. Instead, the intelligence officer went pale and shut her door. Then she showed Inez the other half. Boarding footage from the one wreck the science team had entered that morning. Interior spaces crammed with bunks. Hydroponics in the corridors. Children's marks scratched on the walls at child height, height after height after height, the way parents mark growing kids on a doorframe. The locust swarm was not a war fleet. It had never been a war fleet. It was a town. A migrating, starving town with mining tools, and humanity's 30 warships had killed it in 9 minutes, and its children were tapping on the hulls of lifeboats with no radios. The rescue began on the 3rd day, and it began with an act of quiet insubordination that the official history never recorded. The admiral was in a vice. His orders said quarantine. His fleet's mood was curdling as the boarding footage leaked from deck to deck, because sailors can celebrate a victory over raiders, but no crew ever forged sings about orphans. The formal request for a rescue operation had gone up the chain to Earth, and Earth, 3 light towers away and terrified of its own news feeds, had answered. Await assessment. Inez Vale did not await assessment. She recalculated the air. She had found the lifeboat's recyclers in the salvage scans, counted their scrubber elements, and done the arithmetic nobody had asked her to do. The answer was not some number of days. The answer was 60 hours, and it was already 2 days old. She put the figure on every screen on the flag bridge, with the tapping playing underneath it, and she said one sentence she had rehearsed all night. In 60 hours, this stops being a rescue and starts being a recovery, and you will listen to that sound for the rest of your life. The admiral looked at the number for a long moment. Then he stood, and by his own authority on his own career, gave the order, all boats in the water. What the rescue crews found would keep the fleet's counselors busy for years. Lifeboat after lifeboat of thin, gray-skinned people, insect-quick and utterly unwarlike, shielding their young with their bodies as human marines cut through the hatches to save them. Not one lifeboat resisted. By the 2nd hour, the Marines had stopped carrying weapons on the boats. It made the work easier. By the 10th hour, Inez heard the first human lullaby sung through a translator to an alien child, and had to leave the compartment. On the 6th day, with 400 survivors aboard human ships, Inez Vale went looking for the reason the war had started, and found it in her own filing system. The survivors could communicate. Their leaders, 3 elderly navigators, drew star maps that the intelligence teams could read, and the maps said the swarm had been running for 11 years, across 3 star systems, mining as they fled from something that had consumed their home. What the something was, the navigators would only draw as a black circle, and they would not speak while drawing it. But the part that broke Inez was smaller and much closer to home. The navigators kept pointing at the communications gear, insistent, agitated. We called, the gesture said. We called and called. Inez went back through a year of archived signal traffic from the outer stations, the noise files, the interference logs, everything her own department had classified as unresolved artifacts. It took her 1 night to find them. Structured transmissions, repeating, desperate, on a frequency band humanity had written off as raider jamming. She ran them through the swarm's own lexicon. Requests everyone, water, air scrubbing, trade, we have ores, we have alloys, our children are sick. Humanity's answer every time had been silence because the calls had been filed as noise. The first raid had come 4 months after the first ignored transmission against an automated depot for water ice. No one had ever died in a locust raid, she realized, going back through the casualty lists with new eyes. Not one human. They had robbed machines and fled. The war had been a filing error, her department's filing error. She sat with that for a long time. Then she copied everything, time-stamped it, and locked it in 3 places because she knew exactly what was coming next. What came next arrived on the 8th day, wearing a diplomatic corps pin and a very reasonable smile. The stakes were now planetary. Earth's news feeds had run the victory at the shallows for a week. Parliament had voted the fleet expansion budget on the strength of it. 2 more battle groups were already under construction, and the admiral was going home to a promotion and a statue. Humanity had fought its first space war and won, and that story was worth trillions. And the story in Inez Vale's locked files said humanity had massacred a refugee town fleeing something with no name. The reasonable man from the diplomatic corps explained the situation without ever saying anything actionable. The survivors would be resettled quietly. The signals archive was being consolidated for security review, which meant sealed. No one doubted Miss Vale's technical findings, but context mattered, morale mattered, and the black circle on the navigator's maps mattered most of all. If something out there had eaten the swarm's homeworld, humanity needed fleets, and fleets needed the shallows to stay a victory. He was not wrong, and that was the horror of it. Inez had seen the black circle too. She asked one question: do the survivors get a say? The reasonable man's smile did not move, and that was her answer. That night, the eldest navigator found her at her console, the gray old alien folding himself into the human chair like a heron settling. He had learned 400 words of human speech in 8 days. He used 30 of them, tapping the console in his count of 3 between phrases. "You heard us," he said. "In the wreck field, one person heard." He pressed a data crystal into her hand. The swarm's full archive, 11 years of flight. "Then everyone hears," he said, "or no one is safe. Not from the circle, from yourselves." Inez Vale spent the 9th day making a choice she would have called impossible a month earlier, back when she had been a contractor with a clean conscience and a good salary. The navigator's crystal held everything: the swarm's flight logs, the transmissions humanity ignored, matched date for date against the raids that followed. The Battle of the Shallows from the other side, 9 minutes of mining ships trying to shield their families with hulls that were never armor. And the Black Circle, documented, long-range imagery of the swarm's home system, before and after. Inez watched a living world become the after and understood why the navigators would not speak while drawing. She could release it all, the truth whole, and maybe watch humanity tear itself apart over a war crime while 2 new battle groups sat unfunded and the circle drifted somewhere in the dark. The reasonable man was reasonable. That was the trap. Or she could hold the lie and let the survivors vanish into quiet resettlement. 400 people filed away like their own distress calls. Noise, unresolved. She found her third option at 3 in the morning, in the fleet's own traditions. She took the archive to the one person aboard whose career was already spent, whose statue was already commissioned, and who had given an order against orders once already. The Admiral watched the Black Circle footage twice. He watched the 9 minutes twice. He was silent for a long time, an old man in an empty briefing room with his victory dying in front of him. Then he said, quietly, that a fleet that begins with a lie will lose its real war, whatever that turns out to be. And he asked her to prepare the archive for transmission. "All of it," he said, "under my seal. They can argue with me at the court-martial." The transmission went out on the 10th day, under the Admiral's personal seal, to every relay in human space at once, and Earth did not tear itself apart. That was the thing nobody in the quiet offices had trusted the species to survive. The truth landed, whole, unmanaged. The victory at the Shallows became the tragedy at the Shallows in a single news cycle, and the world grieved and raged and argued, and then did the thing that neither Inez nor the reasonable men had predicted. It adopted the swarm. Not metaphorically, formally. The Parliamentary Act was drafted within a month, and it granted the 400 survivors, and the 1,100 more that rescue sweeps pulled from the swarm's trailing caches over the following year, permanent refuge, restitution, and a seat at the planning table for the fleets. Because the swarm's archive had gone out with everything else, Black Circle included, and humanity had finally understood the actual war. The raids had never been the threat. The raids had been the warning, 11 years early, knocking on the hull of the whole species with no radio to call ahead. The fleet expansion did not stall. It doubled and it changed shape. Rescue tonnage, sensor ships, long-range listening posts crewed by people whose first standing order, written by a chastened signals directorate, was 1 sentence long: "Every voice is a voice until proven otherwise." The Admiral was court-martialed, as he had predicted, and acquitted in 40 minutes, as he had not. He retired the same week. The statue was quietly cancelled at his own request, and something else was built on its plinth instead. Inez Vale was at her console the morning the survivor's eldest navigator asked to see her. He had a last thing to give, he said, from the children. It was a recording, and it undid her. The recording was 11 seconds long, and it had been made in Lifeboat 44 on the 2nd day in the cold, while the fleet above debated quarantine procedures. The survivors had saved everything, because a people who have lost their world save everything. And in Lifeboat 44, a child had been tapping on the hull in counts of 3, the count that Inez had first isolated from 11,000 tumbling fragments. The recording was that tapping from the inside. Underneath it, barely, a small voice was speaking along with the rhythm. The navigator translated the words, though by then Inez had learned enough of their speech to hear it herself, which was the point. It was the swarm's oldest signal litany, the one their children learned the way human children learn to dial an emergency number. 3 taps, 3 words over and over to whoever might be listening. Someone is here, someone is here, someone is here. Inez had heard it. That was all she had done, the whole of her heroism, the entire hinge of the war and the peace. She had been one tired contractor at a console who declined to file a sound as noise. The navigator watched her sit with it. Then he tapped the console 3 times, gently, an old gray heron of a man who had steered a dying town across 3-star systems. Your fleet came to kill locusts, he said. It found people. This is the only battle that has ever mattered in any sky, hearing or not hearing. He left her the recording, she has it still. And on the plinth where the victory statue was going to stand, in the naval yard where the new listening ships are built, there is a bronze casting of a lifeboat hull and a small hammer on a chain, and visitors are invited to strike it. 3 times, everyone does it 3 times. No one has to be told. Years later, the Battle of the Shallows is taught twice at the Academy, in 2 different courses, and cadets are required to pass both. In tactics, it is 9 minutes long, a flawless envelopment, still the cleanest fleet action in the human record. In ethics, it is a year and 9 minutes long, and it begins with a mislabeled frequency band, and the final examination question is the same every year. It shows the raw signal archive unlabeled and asks, what is noise? The swarm lives on series now. Mostly in warrens they cut themselves with the same lances the fleet once catalogued as weapons. They are still miners. They are very good at it. Human stations that once armored against raiders now bid against each other for swarm survey contracts. And the joke on the belt circuit is that the war ended because the enemy underbid us. The Black Circle has a file now and a task force, and humanity's long-range listening arrays face outward across the dark, staffed around the clock. Nothing has been heard yet. When it is, the standing orders are already written and the first page carries no tactics at all. It carries the litany in 2 languages as a reminder of what a signal is. Someone is here. Inez Vale runs the listening school. She is not famous. She declined that, the way the Admiral declined his statue, and the news feeds moved on to louder people, which suited her. But every graduating class ends the same way. She plays them 11 seconds of tapping from Lifeboat 44, and she tells them the only thing she knows for certain after all of it. The universe is full of voices asking one question. She tells them, and every war humanity will ever fight begins with the answer. Listen well. Answer slowly. We won in 9 minutes. It took us a year to hear the wreckage. Some victories should cost more than that. Now we know. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one leaves Earth every day.